Hi, I'm John with the Christian Century, and I'm joined today by Andi Lloyd, who recently wrote a piece for our magazine called The Land Mourns. So we're going to chat a little bit, learn who Andi is, and talk about the article. So first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, John, and I'm happy to be here. So I am currently the pastor of the Trinitarian Congregational Parish of Castine, Maine, which is a UCC church in the town of Castine, on the edge of Penobscot Bay in Maine. And I finished divinity school in May. I graduated from Yale Divinity School and Andover Newton Theological Seminary at Yale. And before that, I had a career as a scientist, which I think I'll talk a little bit about a little bit later. But right now, joyfully learning how to be a pastor on the coast of Maine.
That's great. Congratulations on graduating and the call. Well, people will not have to wait long to hear you talk about your scientific work because let's talk about that now. You mentioned in the article that for 25 years, you were a scientist. Love to
Mm-hmm.
hear more about the work you did then and the transition to going into pastoral ministry.
Yeah. So way back when, a long, long time ago, I got a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology and went off to study forests. I was really interested in forests and how they respond to climate change. Sort of core fascination for me was, what does it mean to be a really long-lived species that can't run away when the going gets tough? And that was the story I pursued my whole scientific career. I used tree rings to answer that question. So I would take little pieces of wood out of trees with a hollow drill bit and get a look at the annual growth rings and figure out what stories trees were telling, how fast they grew and when they reproduced and all of those things. I spent most of my career as a scientist working up in Alaska. I was a professor at Middlebury College in Vermont where I taught biology. And in the summers, I was lucky enough to get to go up to Alaska, often with students, to study the boreal forest, that vast expanse of spruce and other conifers that covers much of the high latitude northern hemisphere. It's a place where climate is changing more rapidly than a lot of other places on Earth. It was a place where the impacts of climate change were pretty visible and pretty tangible and pretty not subtle. And so I spent about 25 years in that world, studying climate change and working on amazing collaborative projects with brilliant people, studying all different aspects of that system. And then God happened. It's the shortest answer to the question of how I got from there to here. I was wrestling with a lifelong belief in God that I didn't know what to do with. And just a little over 5 years ago, I finally got the nerve up to walk into the Congregational Church of Middlebury, Vermont. And it was a life cracked open moment. It was a moment of feeling like I had come home to this place I was only dimly aware I'd been looking for. And that sense of homecoming quickly crystallized into a sense of call to ministry. I was blessed to have a really wonderful pastor who walked that road with me and helped me find the words to wrap around that rather intense experience. And so shortly thereafter, I quit my really awesome faculty position and headed to divinity school. And now here I am.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, it sounds like you are doing great work as a scientist, but I sense that you are still doing great work as a pastor. Um, so, in the article, one of my favorite things in the article that you wrote, you were looking at Hosea, and there's a verse that says, "Therefore the land mourns." And before the therefore, just all these things that are going wrong. There's injustice, there's violence, and you suggest that this verse is pointing us toward how interconnected everything is. And I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about the interconnectedness of our world and how you might see that in this or other verses, how you see it when you look at the world around you.
Yeah, that therefore was, goodness, what a beautiful window that proved to be. And for me, that word ended up inviting me into a place that allowed me to pull together what I knew as an ecologist and what I was learning as a student of theology and pastor in training. And so as an ecologist, one of the things that is abundantly clear is that the world is deeply interconnected. I mean, that's true in a material way, right? That the oxygen that I breathe in has been exhaled by trees. So in a very real molecular sense, we are all interconnected. And the science of ecology has described that connectedness in more and more sophisticated, complicated terms over its life as a science. And that's very true in the world of forests, where I was spending my time, that over my career as a scientist, this whole field of research around mycorrhizal connections and the ways that trees are connected to one another and communicating with one another and collaborating together became known during my career as an ecologist. And so I brought to theology that very clear ecological sense that we are entirely dependent upon and interdependent with the rest of life on earth, whether we choose to live that way or not. And that therefore in that Hosea text was this invitation to take a deep dive into scripture and to find the ways, especially in the Hebrew Bible, that there is a really profound and sophisticated wisdom about that kind of interconnectedness, that in the Hebrew Bible takes the form of the created world, the non-human created world, having a relationship with and being in communication with God in a way that isn't mediated by humanity. And this notion of what I started thinking of, and I can't remember if this was my idea or somebody else's, but started thinking of as a moral ecology, that there is a way in which the rightness or wrongness of relationship is another form of that interconnectedness that as an ecologist, I knew in a material sense that that right relationship is another way of describing that. And what Hosea is pointing us to is this, this world in which relationships have gone wrong. And therefore the land mourns.
Yeah, thank you. And at the end of the article, you say that faith leaders are positioned to help create space for that mourning, for lament, for us to join with each other and with the land in mourning. And I'm just curious if you, as a faith leader, have experienced those kind of brave spaces. What does that look like, or what might that look like for faith leaders?
I won't claim to have figured that out. I'll start there. I certainly, one of the really lovely things about being at divinity school was that Marquand Chapel at Yale, in which the divinity school gathers Monday through Friday for worship, was a space where that kind of communal lament happened sometimes. It was a really special ecumenical creative space. And so I did have the experience in divinity school of gathering in a room where the express purpose was to hold space for lament. And I know a lot of people in ministry right now who are thinking about how to do that at the congregational level. I preached on lament last Sunday. The lectionary just kind of brought us there. And I got the sense that there's a hunger in a lot of people for places in which we can talk about, process, simply sit with the grief that I think a lot of us are feeling about all different aspects of the state of the world. The thing that I'm really interested in figuring out how to do is how to hold and create those spaces in ways that are inclusive of our non-human neighbors, how to hold space for lament out in nature, for example. I feel really blessed to be pastoring a church where there's a lot of interest in taking our lives of faith and the worship of God outside the walls of the church and living in a beautiful place where there's lots of opportunities to do that. And that's one of the things I'm interested in exploring, is what does it look like to actually find ways to be in nature and be in a place of shared lament. And I honestly don't know how to do that. But I know there's a lot of really, really smart people thinking about it. And I'm hoping that some ideas will emerge, because I think it's important. I think we need to learn how to do this. And it's a way of building stronger connections. It's a way of repairing relationships. If we can be together in a place of sorrow, a place of not rushing to fix, but just mourning. It's a beautiful first step to righting some of what's wrong.
Wow. Well, I join you in that hope. You've given us a lot to think about, to wrestle with. Thank you so much for chatting, Andi.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. If anyone didn't get the chance to read the article, the link to the article, The Land Mourns, will be below in the video description, along with Andi's website, which has a ton of different stuff she's working on, writings. Thanks so much for joining us, Andi.
Thanks for having me, John.